So in your experience, right, and whether you want to reference the past like 3 acute years of change or just in general, what are some of the most powerful skills you think a leader needs to develop to meet today's wild world of work?
Many years ago when I started this role, as folks do when you're taking on a new role, right? Day one, day two, they asked me, get up in front of the team and tell them stuff, tell them the vision, tell them the whatever. And I was like, I just joined this organization leading a few hundred people distributed around the world on different sites. And literally the first week, I said, I don't even know where the bathrooms are. You all know more about the business and the team and the software we're developing. But there's a couple of things I do know. And one thing I know, and again, stepping into a role leading a technology organization, I said, whatever you're working on today, you won't be working on that 3 years from now. Right? That's just the pace of change. And that was almost a decade ago, joining this organization. I've been in the role. It's only gotten faster. And so what does that mean? What can we do about that? And one of the things we talk a lot about is designing for change, designing resilience for change, being open to and accepting of change, being curious about what's possible next. And those are skills that's not like a technical skill. That's not like there's technology and stuff that goes into it, but that's a skill as a leader that just creating the mindset within the organization that change is going to happen. And wouldn't it be great if we're the authors of that change and we're designing for it? And so that's that resilience and curiosity between the two of them. Those are things that I look for in new leaders or growing leaders.
Right. That's so interesting. And I mean, especially as these organizations or the organizations you work for become more complex and larger and more distributed, I would imagine that building processes that allow for that resilience to change, that's got to be a whole project in and of itself.
It is. And actually the distributed part is an area where I have a special kind of interest in, coming out of, COVID and lockdown and kind of the way we all changed the way we worked every day, becoming very intentional about that part of the process and conversation and the resilience and listening really hard to what the team needs to ensure we stay connected and unified in purpose has become, I think that's the part where my takeaway in the last few years was we had to get really intentional about this in a way that you sort of could be lazy about. If you're all in the same place together and you have a chance to catch up over coffee or stuff in the, in the line or in the lunchroom, you can't do that anymore. And especially in a larger, kind of more complex organization. So that creating some intentionality and talking about what that means, how different people are going to receive that has been a big part of what Seth and I have been working on this past couple of years.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that the intentionality piece is particularly difficult when we look at, a lot of times leaders don't actually, they have this clear idea of a process that they would like to go through, but they're not always so curious about where people are in that process. So there can be sometimes this feeling of like you're trying to drive all the cattle into a fenced in area, and that works really well if all you want are cattle. But a lot of times what we want people to actually be thinking independently. We want them like contributing. We want them actually like telling us what's going on, because we don't have full visibility, especially with a distributed organization. So we need this like conversational quality to it. And we're just terrible at it. Like, even these situations now with the video stuff, we tend to be just talking at people and not really making space for listening or for quiet.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, so Seth, like there's, even if you take something as simple as facilitating a video call or conversation, right? There's so much more that's going on in each of our respective environments that the people on the other end are not privy to, right? And so I think there's something, Seth, to your point of like, how do you find out where each individual is on their journey of being curious and being able to stomach some of that change or get on board with change, right? That, like, how do you, as a coach, how do you guide leaders in developing a skill set to not only being curious to where people are in their different journeys, but how to find out where they are? Like, what kinds of questions might they be able to ask?
Yeah, I think what I tend to do with most of my leaders that I work with, and Ken and I talk about this a lot in our podcast, is you got to start off with being curious about yourself. Like, what is going on for you? What is actually happening in your world right now? And then, do some discernment about what about that you can share with the team. What about that? Because the vulnerability you bring to a group is going to invite vulnerability from that group. It's not necessarily going to be one-to-one, but it creates a safer space. And I think most leaders think of themselves as like these tabula rosas, like these completely blank slates where they're just there to like get information from everybody else or to extract information. And that creates a power dynamic that doesn't allow for that kind of interference. What do you think about that, Ken, from your experience?
Yeah, I think it was making me chuckle a little bit because long ago and far away, as I was growing up as a leader, you just kind of get this, I don't know, this thing where, okay, I'm going to go to work now and I'm going to put my business on. And you become kind of this almost like one or two dimensional kind of facade that you put on. And what happened during COVID when we all went home, right, and worked from wherever we were, and it was challenging. Don't get me wrong. Like we were all white knuckled. Like, I don't know if we all remember that. We were like trying to get through it and trying to keep together and trying to like figure out what's going to happen. Is the world on fire? But suddenly you got this glimpse into people's worlds in a way that you didn't before. And they got a glimpse into my world in a way that they didn't before. And, I made a rule early on. It was like I had kids at home still. They were in school and doing homeschool, and they could come in anytime. The printer was in my office. They could come in anytime and interrupt me. My dogs come in. I'm not in my home office today because we're kind of mixing it up, but I've got like a musical show poster behind me because I'm big into musical theater. You just got this sudden sense, and it was this accidental lesson for me in terms of, oh, well, if they can see my messy world, then it's not as like scary to share your mess as well and ask for help or get to know each other in a different way. It was the irony of the whole situation was actually by becoming more distributed in that way, we got to know each other in a way that we never would have otherwise.
That's an interesting point. I think, I feel like, Seth, you and I have talked about this in the past, but something about that, I think there's two things, Ken, that come up for me when you share that. Number one is, as a leader, people are looking to you to take their cues, right? And people will only go so far as you go, right? And so if that is in you sharing vulnerability or you showing up and sharing more sides of yourself, right? And with the virtual environment at home, you have the opportunity to put things in your background. Like, my co-founder has like 19 guitars behind him because he's such like a music buff. But it's wonderful because that's something you would never have seen just in the office, right? And I think that's a really powerful thing. So let's